The fire was already roaring by the time Jack Reynolds arrived. Thick black smoke curled into the night sky, turning the stars above into smudges of ash. The old Carter house, once a picture of suburban tranquility, now stood as a blazing inferno, its windows glowing like angry eyes against the darkness. Jack gripped his helmet, trying to steady his breathing as his boots hit the pavement. The dispatcher's voice still echoed in his ears. Child trapped inside. His stomach clenched at the words. Every second counted. "All right, let's move!" Captain Andrews barked, leading the team forward. Jack followed, heart pounding in his chest. They pushed through the front door, swallowed by the suffocating heat and blinding smoke. The house groaned under the weight of the fire, the walls cracking as flames licked up the wallpaper. Then he heard it, a small voice trembling and full of fear. "Help me, please!" Jack froze. The voice echoed through the roaring flames, clear and desperate. He exchanged a glance with his partner, Mitch, whose wide eyes mirrored his own shock. "She's alive!" Jack shouted, bolting towards the sound. His body moved on instinct, weaving through the burning wreckage, past fallen beams and flickering embers. The voice grew louder, leading him deeper into the house. "Where are you?" he called, scanning the smoke-filled hallway. "Help me!" The voice whimpered again, coming from the end of the corridor. Jack pushed forward, his boots crunching over shattered glass. He kicked open a door, expecting to find a terrified child huddled inside. But there was nothing, just an empty, burning room. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. "Hello?" Silence. Suddenly, a crashing sound behind him sent him spinning around. The ceiling above began to cave in, forcing him to dive out of the way. Mitch grabbed his arm, dragging him back. "Jack, we have to go. It's coming down." "But I heard her!" Jack protested, his voice raw with desperation. "There's no one here!" Mitch yelled, tugging him towards the exit. With his lungs burning and vision blurring, Jack stumbled out of the collapsing house, his legs barely carrying him. The cold night air hit his face like a slap, but the relief never came, because the truth hit him harder than the smoke ever could. The girl, Emily Carter, had died long before they arrived. Jack sat in the firehouse locker room, staring at the floor. The scent of smoke clung to his skin, refusing to let go. "She was gone before we got there," Mitch said softly, sitting beside him. "There was nothing you could have done." But Jack barely heard him. The girl's voice echoed in his head, rattling around like a ghost he couldn't shake. It had been so real, so desperate. Over the following weeks, guilt ate away at him. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in that house, hearing her voice calling from the flames. One night, unable to bear it any longer, he drove to the remains of the Carter house. The smell of burnt wood and loss still lingered in the air. He stood outside the charred ruins, staring at the blackened skeleton of what used to be a home. And then he heard it again, a whisper on the wind. "Why didn't you save me?" Jack spun around, but the street was empty. His hands trembled, and he stumbled back to his truck, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. He was losing his mind. He had to be. Months passed, and the calls kept coming, fires raging through the city like an angry curse. Jack threw himself into work, but the whispers followed him everywhere. One night, during a routine drill at the station, the fire alarm blared unexpectedly. The team suited up and raced to an old apartment complex downtown. It was chaos, smoke curling through the corridors, residents screaming as they fled. Jack moved with precision, checking room after room. Then, from deep inside the building, he heard it. "Help me, please!" Jack's blood turned cold. It was her, the same voice, the same trembling desperation. He froze, staring down the dark hallway. The exact same words, the same pitch. Mitch caught up to him. "Jack, what's wrong?" Jack didn't answer. He ran toward the sound, kicking open a door, searching for the girl who wasn't supposed to be there. And just like before, nothing, only flames and shadows. But something moved in the smoke. Jack took a shaky step back as the shape of a little girl flickered just beyond the fire, her eyes hollow, her lips moving soundlessly. He blinked, and she was gone. He stumbled out of the building, gasping for air, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Mitch followed, concern etched on his soot-covered face. "Jack, man, are you okay?" Jack swallowed hard, nodding even though his legs felt like jelly beneath him. But he knew now, he wasn't okay. Determined to find answers, Jack dove into the fire department's archives. He unearthed reports of other firefighters who had heard things they couldn't explain. Voices calling from the flames, figures appearing in the smoke. One report from decades ago stood out. A firefighter, just like him, had reported hearing a little girl's voice during a fire. His log entry read, "She calls to me. She doesn't let go." He never returned to work after that. Jack's hands trembled as he read further. Another fire, another girl, the same voice. It wasn't just Emily. The realization sent ice through his veins. The nightmares grew worse. Jack saw her every night, standing at the foot of his bed, her hair singed, her dress in tatters. She whispered the same thing over and over, "You'll never save me." He woke up drenched in sweat, his wife's concerned face hovering over him. "Jack, you need help," she whispered, but he couldn't explain it. One final fire changed everything. A massive warehouse fire broke out late one night. Jack's team was deployed, and the moment he stepped inside, the voice came again, louder, more insistent. "Help me!" He pushed through the wreckage, his heart pounding. Deep inside the burning structure, he found something that made his blood freeze. A nursery. Charred cribs lined the walls, covered in soot, forgotten relics of something that should never have been there. Children's handprints were burned into the walls, and in the flickering firelight, he saw her again. Emily, or whatever was left of her. The walls seemed to breathe, and Jack stumbled backward, his breath caught in his throat. A force yanked him back just before the ceiling collapsed, pulling him out of the fire. He coughed violently on the ground outside, looking back at the building as it crumbled. And he swore. In the smoke, he saw her face. Jack left the fire department after that night. The ghosts of the ones he couldn't save were too much to bear. But even as he drove away from the city, the radio in his truck crackled to life. "You'll come back, Jack. They always do." The voice was soft, familiar, and he couldn't tell if it was real or if it was just in his head. But deep down, Jack knew the truth. Some fires never die.